almost everyone from the youngest age has found themselves seeking refuge and safe harbor in a deep-rooted sense of I. And this is what happens when we're born. Awareness arrives in this container of the human body, the human mind, the human being, and immediately starts to attach itself and to try to establish itself to, we could say, find itself, discover itself in the form of a sense of identity. And depending on the circumstances of each person's life, this tendency to attach and to establish as a feeling of I can take on different forms. It adapts itself in different forms. In some people, it adapts as a feeling of being entitled, a feeling of being deserving, a feeling of being better, of being superior. In other people, it can form as the feeling of someone I have suffered, who has suffered. I have suffered terribly. I am justified in being angry about this or being sad about this. I am fully warranted in seeking revenge and getting revenge and making sure that whoever has done me wrong will be found guilty and punished accordingly. And until that happens, and until I know that happens, I can never rest. I can never let go of my feeling of having suffered and having suffered hurt or pain or loss. And in yet other people, this establishment of I can take the form of always needing to be right, or on the contrary, always feeling that I am wrong, or always feeling that I am good and needing to be good and find better and better ways to demonstrate that I am good. Or on the other hand, feeling I am bad, I've always been bad, I will always be bad, and clinging to this notion of being bad. And the same thing would apply in the case of feeling very attractive or feeling very unattractive, being very happy with oneself as in terms of appearance and as a person and as a life, or feeling very unhappy about appearance and life circumstances and how other people perceive us as a person. And this feeling of I gets more and more enveloped by all of these emotional attitudes, which are like emotional blankets. They're wordless, and they operate very fast in us, and they're constantly camouflaging our sense of I, which is deep inside. And the more we're caught up in this feeling of I, the more this gives legitimacy to all these emotions. And conversely, the more legitimacy we give to these emotions, these which encapsulate this feeling of I, the more legitimacy it gives to the feeling of I. And so this cycle just perpetuates itself. These two aspects of the ego mutually reinforce one another on an ongoing basis and perpetuate one another and perpetuate this unique feeling of I. Even when we come to an interest in spirituality, seeking the truth, wanting to rediscover who and what we are at our deepest core, unbeknownst to us, we come to it from this deeply entrenched feeling of I. And then it becomes a matter of digging ourselves out of this hole, really, of this feeling of I, me, mine, what I want, what I need, what I have suffered. What gets missed and unseen and overlooked is that this feeling of I is not the awareness, the consciousness of it. It is not that which is seeing it. There's something else which can see this feeling of I. But this seems almost foreign to us because the feeling of I is so familiar, so entrenched, so persuasive, so convincing that that's who we feel we are. And so it becomes then very difficult to trace the feeling of I all the way down to its deepest root. And to see that it is really an artificial sense of identity. Despite what may have happened in our life, all the good things, all the terrible things, in both cases, it has caused this sense of I to grow stronger. And in neither case is that the consciousness of awareness. In neither case is it that which can realize itself, can awaken, can be enlightened, can become enlightened as itself. Another way to say this is that awareness in everyone is in fact caught up in the notion of being the person. This is a subtle point, because that's all it is. Awareness is simply caught up, entangled in this notion of being a person. And it's difficult to see this about ourselves. But imagine, for example, there is someone exactly like you. They live across town, or they live in another city, or even in another country. But in every other way, they're exactly like you. They look like you. They walk like you. They've suffered exactly the same circumstances of good fortune and bad fortune. Exactly the same. And from where you stand looking at that person, you can see, you realize you're not caught up in that identity. You're not caught up in the life of that person, and you're not caught up in the feeling of being that person. You can see from a distance that that person is living their life for better or for worse, for good and for bad, for all that they've experienced. But you're not entangled. And the truth is that this is exactly the relationship that pure awareness has to our own person and our own life. It need not be caught up. It only is caught up because it chooses to attach itself. If you were to go and find that person across town or in another city or country, and if you chose to spend all your time with them and try to comfort them and try to persuade them everything's fine despite everything that's happened, or that things are not really the way they appear to that person, and you tried to spend lots of time persuading that person to think differently, to view the world differently, to view themselves differently, it would be almost fruitless endeavor. But you would perhaps realize that you're getting yourself unnecessarily entangled when you need not. And you could go back to your perspective from a distance, from outside of, literally outside of that person and their entire life. And again, this is actually the way it is for us. Awareness need not be entangled. It actually doesn't exist inside it. I was going to say it can step outside, but it already is outside. It's just that it has become psychologically attached. But in this sense, and this is what can be difficult to realize, it literally does not matter what has happened to us in our life and with our life up to this point. And it is not important that we set the record straight, or that we remedy all the ills, or that we punish all the bad doers who hurt us or caused us pain, or circumstances that created loss for us. All of these things are part of the human life, the human being. They actually have nothing whatsoever to do with awareness itself, with consciousness itself. And with this realization, there can become tremendous freedom. It would be like you had been carrying an anchor with you all the time, dragging it behind you. It was always weighing you down wherever you turned. And suddenly you realize you can let it go. You can cut that anchor free, that weight free. Because although it was there providing ballast for this sense of identity, that's all it was doing, and this sense of identity proves to really be a hologram, an artificial psychological entity, which is not what you are at the core of yourself as pure consciousness or awareness. And this is the day of beauty. It may come just as a moment initially, but then it can keep coming back. It can keep reappearing, keep re-realizing as awareness that it need not be and is not really caught up in the notion of being this person.